Tonight we'll hear about how civic institutions responded to tremendous challenges as South Africa transitioned from apartheid to a robust and pluralistic democratic society. But this week offered us a startling and tragic reminder of how vulnerable we are as well. The bombings in Boston represent the absolute darkest of the human spirit, but at the same time, the backdrop, the Boston Marathon, which raises millions of dollars for charities around the world, and the aftermath of the bombings, where law enforcement officials, citizens, store owners, even Republicans and Democrats came together and wrapped their arms around the city of Boston to try to heal the wounds that had occurred. I can't help but think there's no better time to have the conversation we're going to have this evening. So without further ado, let me say thank you to the organizations that have made this event possible and introduce our first speaker. First, I'd like to thank the U.S. Institute of Peace and the Institute of International Education for providing a grant to support this evening's program. Second, Georgia State also generously supported tonight's event, specifically the Departments of Religious Studies, Communication, Political Science, English, the Middle East Institute, the Center for Hellenic Studies, each provided generous support for tonight's event. And without each of your support, it could not have occurred. Third, I'd like to thank the World Affairs Council of Atlanta for helping facilitate the use of this beautiful space this evening and for reaching out to their extensive network to ask stakeholders who are interested in this conversation to join us. And finally, and certainly far from least, I would like to thank the Carter Center for its support this evening. In addition to helping publicize tonight's program, we're very fortunate to have the Center's Conflict Resolution Director, Harir Balian, here to give some introductory remarks. Mr. Balian oversees the Center's efforts to monitor conflicts, in addition to working with programs focused on human rights, environmental degradation, and democracy around the world. Previously, Mr. Balian has served in a leadership capacity at the UN, at the International Crisis Group, and at the Organization for Security and Cooperation of Europe. So if I could have your assistance in welcoming Mr. Balian.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Abbas, and thank you, Georgia State University, for inviting the Carter Center to be part of this beautiful evening's event, and for asking me to share a few views on the role of civil society in conflict resolution, favorite subject of mine. I'll be very short because I'm sure as I'm here to hear Ambassador Rasool, you are all here to hear Ambassador Rasool as well, and not discussion from the Carter Center or from me. I can't help but start my presentation this evening without discussing the broader subject, the broader context within which the discussion this evening is taking place, including Ambassador Rasool's presentation. That is, how can governments, international institutions, and ultimately civil society address effectively militant religious extremism without sacrificing the core values of universal human rights? Well, I'm afraid this is exactly the problem that we have been confronted with in this country for the past 10+ years since 9/11. And I'm afraid we have failed in addressing this issue. Since we're in a university context, I would give ourselves a grade of F in this attempt. The war that we declared against terrorism 12 years ago, and we continue to wage to date, has brought us extraordinary renditions, in plain English, kidnapping, indefinite detentions without trial, disappearances, enhanced interrogation techniques, otherwise known as torture, and targeted assassinations, contrary to human rights norms and breaching international humanitarian laws. To be sure, this war against terrorism has gotten rid of some nasty characters. But damage done to universal human rights principles has been greater and perhaps longer lasting than the good that it has resulted in. But civil society in this country also has failed the test of the extraordinary times in which we've lived the last 10 years by responding with ordinary criticism and offering ordinary advice not commensurate with the task, the threat at hand. In contrast to the US war on terrorism, the examples of the UN ad hoc tribunals stand out very tall as an effective response to leaders who terrorized entire societies, even committed genocide, in the name of extremist religious and nationalist rhetoric in the former Yugoslavia. I'm certain it would have been easier to target and assassinate many of the leaders, extremist leaders who were responsible for these heinous acts. But justice would have been subverted had they done so. And revenge would have been served quite well. To be sure, it was harder to wait for the long years that it took to apprehend those indicted and to send them to the Hague Tribunal. But patience paid off, and justice was better served when these extremist leaders were tried in open courts. What a concept, open courts, convicted and sent to jail to serve long sentences. The irony is that the US was in the leadership of bringing these criminals to justice through international tribunals and international adjudication. The ad hoc international tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Sierra Leone were part of conflict resolution, peacemaking, and peace-building efforts. And civil society organizations were very much part of the effort pressing the international community to stay the course. The International Crisis Group, a fledgling international non-governmental organization at the time, was in the forefront of cooperating and collaborating with the tribunal, Yugoslavia tribunal, to help the tribunal, and pressing NATO to arrest the indicted suspects. And I was a very proud member of that organization from the very first days of its existence. Another example of positive model was the collaboration between conflict resolution and human rights actors in Sierra Leone, encouraged by the UN. The UN was the dominant external actor there, fielding a strong human rights team advising on provisions of the peace agreement and coordinating with various civil society human rights organizations pressing for human rights provisions in the peace agreements. Together, they were able to incorporate human rights norms in the peace building effort. Thus, civil society in Sierra Leone became an indispensable partner in the peacemaking and peace-building effort following the civil war there. Where peace agreements have failed to include human rights provisions, and where they failed to incorporate human rights norms in the peace-building process, both the conflict resolution and human rights agendas have suffered. Civil society are most effective in preventing violent conflict and extremism when they press their governments to agree to human rights obligations and provisions, and more importantly, to honor those provisions or obligations. Such efforts improve governance and increase public confidence in state institutions, thus reducing societal tensions. Another area in which civil society can be most effective in preventing violent conflict is when they espouse nonviolence as a modus operandi and train protest leaders in that strategy. Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco are recent examples in the last 2 years that we've witnessed. Once conflict erupts, through track 2 activities or back channel activities, civil society organizations and leaders have been on the forefront of efforts to build peace. And let me cite a few examples. The Geneva Initiative, a model peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis, is one such example, assisted by Palestinian and Israeli non-governmental organizations, or spearheaded by Palestinian and Israeli non-governmental organizations, and assisted by international non-governmental organizations, including the Carter Center about 10 years ago. Civil society level dialogue and similar back-channel efforts often generate new ideas for peacemaking and bridge gaps in difficult conflict situations, and eventually influence the thinking of government leaders quite effectively. The Carter Center has done this type of work in South America. One example is Colombia and Ecuador, the Palestinian territory, the 2 Sudans, and more. Local community level dispute resolution with the help of civil society organizations is another way to prevent conflicts. Our work in Liberia, focusing on the rule of law and bringing the law to where it is needed most, is another such example. Finally, the 90-plus election observation missions that we've conducted in over 37 countries in the last 25 years or so, in conflict-prone countries, also serves the purpose of reducing tensions and preventing conflict, another civil society effort in conflict resolution. Let me end my comments by turning to the central role in norm setting that civil society organizations have also assumed by creating momentum for global agreements that contribute to conflict resolution and peace. The Helsinki Accords, in which civil society leaders and organizations, both from behind the Iron Curtain, domestic organizations, and international non-governmental organizations, had an important role in formulating and promoting the Helsinki Accords. They can be credited with having set the foundation for the integration of Europe based on human rights and collective security. The Landmines Treaty of 1997 is another example in which civil society organizations played a critical role. The Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court of 1998 is yet another example, and here also the Carter Center played an important role. And just a few weeks ago, the Small Arms Treaty also was the product of civil society effort by and large. Obviously, these brief comments do not do justice to the subject. We can spend a whole evening on this subject, but again, we're here to hear Ambassador Rasool, so thank you very much.
terrific introduction and overview of some of the issues and programs at stake here. Thank you very much for that. That was terrific. What I'd like to do before I turn over the program to Professor Abbas Barzagar is actually show a video that would give some background and some context for the discussion we're going to have this evening. I'm hoping that this is going to go very smoothly and that the sound is ready to participate, but it's not. Our AV guy is in the back, but we don't have any sound. That is sound. Yes. That is not actually the video music. Can you?
It's all the way up.
It's not a volume issue. It's not playing any of the sound from the video. It's the wrong input. Oh, sure.
If you want me to,
Boss, I think I'm gonna. Well, I think rather than belabor this video, we're going to transition to the interview. If that's okay.
it's not going to happen.
It doesn't appear to be so. So rather than keep you in suspense, I'd rather just introduce our featured speakers for this evening. If I could ask Abbas and Professor Rasool to join us on stage, that would be terrific. Abbas will introduce the ambassador. Thank you.